to another episode of BetterUp Live. I'm your host, Chad, Don't Call Me Gorgeous Thomas. And today we have an incredible show for you. We're going to explore an indispensable, yet often understudied domain of living, character. Together, we're going to break down the science of character development, and we'll even provide you with some playbooks. So whether you are at home with your kids, on a virtual conference call with your colleagues, or even looking at that person you see in the mirror each day, you'll be able to build character. By the way, the next time you look at that person in the mirror, give them a wink, an encouraging word. You look good. You work so hard. You deserve to give yourself some props. After all, character building starts within. You know, in life, you might be lucky enough to meet 2 or even 3 people who redefine what it means to live to your fullest potential. I have the good fortune of introducing one of those people today. So without further ado, I'd love to introduce you to award-winning researcher, pioneering psychologist, author of New York Times bestselling book Grit, founder and CEO of Character Lab, Dr. Angela Duckworth. Hey, Angela, how you doing?
Hi, Chad. I'm doing great. I'm so happy to be here with you.
Thank you. I'm so happy that you're here as well and really excited for the show today. So, Angela, I know that you and I have some history together, but I want to set the record straight on this photo that's been circling the positive psychology community. Consuelo, can you cue it up for me? Thank you. So, Angela, you're pointing at me like a mom scolding her child on perhaps one of the most important days of my life, and definitely the last time I'll get an Ivy League degree. Do you remember what you were saying to me in that moment?
I don't, but look, I'm smiling in the photo. What was I saying?
Unfortunately, you were saying, Chad, you were so corny because I just completed a rather impressive pirouette across the stage. And, you know, hey, that makes me corny and not a part of the aristocracy. So be it. We're not here, though, to talk about me as a Renaissance man. We are here to talk about building character and the strengths that are aligned to that. You know, one of my first encounters with you was actually through an email thread when one of my fraternity brothers asked me to recommend any candidates that could apply for an internship at a financial services firm. I sent the email to you and you replied actually within the hour. And I was shocked that you even decided to take the time to respond. But I think that's a perfect way to start to deconstruct character and, frankly, the Angela Duckworth story. You know, people may not know this, but you began the early part of your career as a teacher in the New York City public school system. I was right across the water in Newark, New Jersey, going through that public school system as well. And many of those harsh obstacles and challenges you face in that inner city were the same in New York. I'd really like to understand, how did that experience shape the foundation of your character?
For me, going into the public schools was a real wake-up call. I mean, in many ways, but one of the things I discovered was that I wasn't as great as I thought I would be at bringing out the character in my own students. So I had this very strong sense. I taught high school math. I taught a little bit of middle school math too. I had this really strong sense that, you know, my kids could be, for example, like really hard workers and incredibly resilient in the face of failure. But when it came time for me as their teacher, and this was my job, right, to bring that out of them, to bring out their grit, for example, it wasn't doing all that great a job. So I left teaching thinking, you know, I have to get better at this. And I knew that these qualities of character were malleable, but I wasn't doing a great job doing the, you know, the molding. So I became a psychologist, and I've learned a lot in that next chapter as well. And it's only affirmed my conviction that character is not fixed. It's something that you can grow. And I think, to me, one of the major ways you do that is actually by understanding character and also understanding role models of character.
That's awesome. I really appreciate that. Well, given that you definitely are the resident character expert, could we actually hear from you what the definition of character is from Angela Duckworth, and then maybe expounding upon a bit more upon the mission of Character Lab?
I don't think character is a super popular word right now. I'm hoping to change that.
Hmm.
Maybe BetterUp can help me. I think it's a great word, though, right? So, one of the first people to use the word character was Aristotle, and I think Aristotle's definition is the best one, and that was really everything that you do, think, or feel that is both good for society and good for you. And so when you start to think like, oh, what are all those things? You actually generate a really long list. And when I rattle these off, you can think about the extent to which they define you and your character. What about, for example, gratitude, generosity, kindness, emotional intelligence, curiosity, intellectual humility, creativity, grit, something I study, self control, optimism. The list goes on. And I think this idea was also what Maria Montessori, the great preschool educator, and of course, Martin Luther
Hmm.
King, who you already, played a little, you had an image and his quote when Martin Luther King said that character plus intelligence, this is the true goal of education. I believe that that is true. So that's how I define character. It's very inclusive. And I'll just say that it's not super popular, I think, because sometimes people hear that word and they think like, oh, that sounds like it's fixed, or they sound
Hmm.
like it sounds like moralistic. But if you prefer, you can use other words like social emotional learning or personal qualities or non-cognitive skills. I mean, there are synonyms, but I like Aristotle.
That's awesome. I really appreciate that. And just that virtuous approach to how you can continue to define yourself. But sadly, you're right. Character is not something that we study enough, or it's not popularized enough. But I'm hoping that after this conversation, we can change that a bit. Character Lab, you actually create some really practical playbooks for character. And I was hoping you might be able to just break down some of those dimensions of character to the audience.
Character Lab is a nonprofit. I'm very proud to lead it with a guy named Sean Talamas. And we are both PhD scientists who were really interested in the science of character development. And we work
Hmm.
with researchers some of your audience may know, people like Carol Dweck, people who really are at the forefront of understanding, how can you develop the mindsets and the skill sets in young people and, of course, the rest of us as well. And one thing that we do, I think particularly, and what makes Character Lab unique is that we really believe that there's power in connecting directly to scientists. So, everywhere on the
Hmm.
internet, you can read about, some journalist's interpretation of a Carol Dweck study. But in our, research, our mindset, I guess, is about like that direction connection. And so if you go to characterlab.org, every word on the page is actually written by a scientist, hopefully without any jargon or unnecessary statistics. But you can find there playbooks on how to develop curiosity, playbooks on how to develop grit, or
Hmm.
any of the other character strengths that I mentioned. And we also, of course, conduct research for those scientists as well in schools with school partners. But for the audience's benefit, I think the most relevant aspect of Character Lab are the things that you can read and see directly on the website.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. When I think about my own guiding philosophy to character, it's often framed by the experiences that I have, but also by the people that I strive to emulate. And we know that you've had the fortune, because of your hard work and character, to partner with some of the most impressive coaches, athletes, business executives across the world. I'd be curious, could you talk to us about someone that you know that personifies character?
Well, this may be just because it's on top of mind because I had my conversation with him this morning at 8:30, and that's Anson Dorrance. He's a soccer coach at UNC, and he's been coaching the UNC women's soccer team, the Tar Heels, for actually decades. And he is, I believe, the winningest coach in NCAA history, with something
Wow.
like about 24 NCAA championships. And if you asked me like, well, what is Anson like? Well, first of all, he says to his own athletes that when you get to his team, you've probably gotten pretty far in life on talent. And he says, once you're here and you're at this level of competition, like this is when character especially matters. And I think that's really profound because when Anson uses the word talent, for a lot of us, it's, how intelligent we are or how gifted we are in another domain. You could be athletics, could be music, etc. And one of the things that I really like about the idea of character is that it really is different from your talents. And, regardless of whatever innate talent you have, you can be a hard worker. You can come to practice early. You can stay late. You can always say to yourself, is there a way that I could put my team first? What can I do to be a good teammate tomorrow that I didn't maybe do as well yesterday? And so I think when Anson thinks about himself as a coach, he's not only trying to model character, which he does, but he also is trying to be intentional about showing in the 4 years that he has with athletes that you can grow so much. And I think that's what makes him so remarkable, both as a paragon of character, but also as a teacher of character.
That's incredible. And you're right. He is the most winningest coach. I think when I think about that example, it actually reminds me of a wonderful example of kindness that you bestowed upon me when you actually got me a signed copy of Leland Melvin's autobiography, Chasing
You still
Space.
have it.
Yes, I do. And as a resident amateur astronomy nerd, I was really moved by his story. But I think whether you're an astronaut or an elite athlete, coach, or musician, the one thing that they all have in common is deliberate practice. And they know that deliberate practice actually makes perfect. I have to continue to practice each day not to take my shoes from my feet into the bedroom and take them off, as my wife scolds me often. But another way to practice something that's actually real is thinking about your formula. Talent times effort actually equals achievement. And, we understand that you have mastered really building these character strengths, but I think it'd be awesome if the audience would have a chance to dive in to understand the inner workings behind you, Dr. Duckworth, and understanding that mastery of strength. So would you be open to the audience asking you a few questions here?
Absolutely.
All right.
I'd love
That's
that.
awesome. That's awesome. Okay, let's get ready to dive into our next section, building the character playbook with Dr. Duckworth. Oh,
I hate grits,
sorry.
actually. That's a little secret.
Well, that's why you're even more gritty than I am, Angela. So, all right, the first question that we have for you: how can organizations create a culture of building character?
There is this very old idea in psychology of something called the strong situation, and it's contrasted with the weak situation. And if you think about organizations that build character and grit, I think you want them to be strong situations or strong cultures. And what that is that, the values and the norms are really consensually held, that everybody kind of is more or less singing from the same hymn book, and they're singing pretty loudly. And if you have that strong culture, in particular, if that culture is really oriented toward growth and learning, that is what helps. It's actually very related to the idea of having a growth mindset as an individual, believing that you yourself can change. Well, an organizational culture can send that message to everyone that we're all about development and growth. And if you think about it, you're like, well, isn't every organization like that? And the answer is no, because there are a lot of organizations that are more oriented towards performance and to kind of a rank ordering of individuals. And the kind of implicit assumption there is that, if you're number one, you're always going to be number one. Number 20 is always going to be worse than you. And so we just have to reward number one and punish number 20. But if you actually change your framing and you say, the whole idea here is that everybody's going to try to be their best and every day is going to be better than yesterday, then it really does, I think, markedly change. For example, when somebody has a, half-hour meeting and, you put them in charge of leading, and frankly, the meeting doesn't go so well. They didn't manage time. The agenda wasn't great. If you're in a growth culture, then the response to that is like, well, what can we learn from that 30-minute meeting? Like, let's see what we can do for the next meeting so that it can be better, as opposed to, we'll never let you run another meeting.
Got it. Those are probably words to leaders' ears just from managing a culture of growth and continuing to sustain. Well, Angela, that was actually just the layup. I want to get ready for our actual next session. So everybody, listen, I need you to just release all of that Thursday afternoon carpal tunnel. Do a little jazz hands exercise. We have some music for you here. All right, and now we're going to head into what we call the lightning round. All right, Dr. Duckworth, let's get ready. So, Angela, this is how it's going to work. We're going to give you 120 seconds to answer as many of these questions as you can. All right, and as soon as you say go, I'll have Consuelo start the timer.
Go.
All right. What is your favorite exercise for practicing gratitude?
My favorite exercise is before I get out of bed, I think of 3 good things that happened to me recently. And usually they have something to do with my daughter, Lucy, my daughter, Amanda, and my husband, Jason. But the great thing about the 3 good things exercise is that you're allowed to have repetitions. So before you get out of bed tomorrow, think of 3 good things.
Awesome. Okay. What's a suggestion if someone's been hard on themselves lately that they can do to increase self-compassion?
So here's a little trick for being less self-critical. Pretend you're your best friend, right? So my best friend is named Sue. And if I have a really bad day and I lose my temper and I say things that I wouldn't even want to tell you, Chad, that I've said to my kids on a really bad day when I've lost it. And I think if I confess that to Sue, what would she say? Would she yell at me? Would she tell me that I'm a bad person? No, she would listen empathically and she would help me figure out how not to do that the next time I'm really in a bad mood. And I think being your own best friend and being outside of yourself will show you the kind of compassion that you deserve.
Incredible. Man. All right. My kids aren't getting much schoolwork done. What can I do to help them be more productive?
It is really hard for kids to get work done. You know, they're kind of in summer mode because they're home and there's no kind of routine where they have to like get out the door and catch the bus. It's really, really hard. Honestly, for every student I've talked to. And I think one of the things that they can do is make a schedule. So they can say, for example, at dinner today, what they're going to do tomorrow and write down the times that they're going to do that.
Gotcha. All right. Do you have any tips for someone that wants to jumpstart creativity or a new routine?
This is a good question. I think one of the things that helps people is if they actually jump into something that's already structured in a new domain. So for example, if you think, well, I kind of feel like I'm in a funk, I want to do something different, but I don't know how. If you sign up for a MOOC or if you start a cooking class or something where it's already structured and there's a progression and you don't have to think at every step like, oh, what do I do now? That can really help.
Gotcha. All right. So this is a bonus question. I have a whole new appreciation for teachers. What kind of support could educators use right now?
Well, you asked me what my favorite gratitude exercise was, and I said the 3 blessings exercise, but I have a silver medal second favorite, and it's great. It's called the gratitude letter. And I think that teachers in this country really, really deserve letters, notes, postcards, emails, even a text message that says, hey, you know what? I appreciate you. And, you know, if you can give it a specific example in that letter, like, you know, when you said to my daughter after she wrote this essay, you know, the following, you know, you quote something, you're like, it made her day. And I just want to tell you, you know, you're making a difference in the lives of children. Oh my gosh, you will make that teacher's day and they don't hear it enough.
That's, you know, I just thought by giving an apple, I was doing a good job, but who knew just a text could actually transform a teacher's day. I'll definitely make sure I follow up on that. Better than an apple, that's true. And definitely better than grits, which we know that you don't like now. So, you know, I think it's incredible that you've given us, one, this rapid fire feedback on ways to build character, but everyone has gotten to know Angela, the CEO, Angela, the professor. But I think what's really important for everyone right now is how can they model some of the behaviors as Angela, the mom? And so I'd love to just dovetail into our next section and think about how do we shape the future with Angela, the mom, and the lifelong educator.
Turn to page 394.
That was
Angela,
great. Thank you for the Will Smith photos.
Of course. And we weren't suggesting that you were like that nefarious professor in Harry Potter at the end. Well, listen, we know that during these unprecedented times, self-reflection is important, but when you think about character, especially as a parent, you have to think about doing something in service for your children who you're trying to build. And sorry, what's that, Consuelo? We have another video of kids? Play it.
Hi, Dad.
Is there something you'd like to learn about?
That is a tricky question. Science, math, reading. I love to paint. Life is so beautiful with paint. So I like doodling. I like learning new numbers. Geography, planets, space. Also snakes. Did you know that narwhals are real?
I did know that.
Isn't it crazy? How to do things that I don't know how to do. But it's not so easy. When it's raining, I love to jump in the puddles. Then it's raining right now.
What do you do when you're sad?
I try to fix it.
You try to fix it? How?
With somebody's help. I would do a deep breath.
You would do a deep breath. Oh, that's awesome. Like we've practiced.
Do you want ice cream?
What are some things that you're grateful for?
My mother. My whole family. My family. Disney. Health, etc., etc. Any more questions?
I love that.
Woo. Hard not to get
We need to
emotional
get you a
after
tissue.
that. Nope. I'll pretend like they're allergies. So, Angela, as we're thinking about parenting, which is critical during this time, I'd love to just get some questions to you about thinking about shaping that experience. And right now, I'm sure that many parents are just uncertain about the future of education. So what advice would you give to parents who are concerned about the future of education and what that looks like?
So yeah, parents are parents, like everyone, honestly. We're all under a lot of pressure, and I think if my 17 and 18-year-old heard that I was giving out parenting advice, they would laugh because I'm not a perfect parent. And one of the recommendations is to be a role model. But I hasten to say, it doesn't mean being perfect, right? So it doesn't mean that like you don't have a bad day or that you never get discouraged or, you always manage your temper or you're always organized. I think what kids need is a vulnerable, real, growth-oriented role model. And actually, sometimes parents ask me, well, like, how young is it? Or maybe the better way is like, how old do they have to be for you to have, real kind of honest conversations about like what you're going through. And obviously you have to use some judgment. And I don't think you really want to, saddle your kids with things that are going to keep them up at night. But, even when my kids were much younger than they are today, I was pretty honest with them about, things that I screwed up and times that I, just so disappointed I cried, and it was okay for them to see that. So I think being an intentional and real role model, a model of growth, not a model of perfection. I think that's one thing parents can do even in these uncertain times. And I guess one other thing about the uncertainty in particular, and you're really right, Chad, to underscore that that's the hardest thing, honestly, about what we're going through. Not just that it's so bad, and it's pretty bad, but just the uncertainty, not knowing what the fall is going to be like, when the economy is going to recover, what the future of COVID is going to be. And I think the lesson from so much of psychological science, including that of Marty Seligman, who's, I know, a close friend of BetterUp, is that you have to hold on to the things that you can control. And they may not be everything, and they certainly aren't going to necessarily be like the big things sometimes, but you're going to be able to say, you know what, I can send a nice text message today. I can unload the dishwasher, before the rest of my family gets up. I can wake up and I can make my bed. And I think it's those small things that you can take control of, that you can create certainty. You can kind of have agency, as Marty would like to say. So if parents can be intentional role models, not perfect role models, and if they can model, taking charge of the things that we can take charge of, while acknowledging that so much is uncertain, I think that the parents and their kids are going to be okay.
That was beautiful, and that's definitely not an easy thing to accomplish. And so much of parenting might be, how do I get this all done in the next 10 years for my kids? But it's a day-by-day practice. And you're right, with all of the ambiguity that we see, things can change hour by hour. One more question that I like to ask you before we close this incredible experience is, one of my heroes, Martin Luther King, said that character is what you do when no one else is looking. And at BetterUp, we care so much about creating coaching experiences that help people to sharpen the behaviors so the outcome is someone of a more developed character. But we also care about it from our employees. And one question that we actually ask all of our candidates when it comes to applying to BetterUp is, what is one legacy or trait that you would like to bestow upon your kids one day? And I'm wondering, Angela, if you could leave us with that, because I think it's a great way to think about the future of your generation.
Well, you might think that Angela Duckworth wants to leave a legacy of grit, but I did this exercise with my own undergraduate students this semester, actually, and it was called the "This I Believe" essay. And you just start off with the words "This I believe," and you just see what happens next. And when I wrote "This I Believe," I wrote "This I believe in generosity." And then what came out of my pen as I was writing across the page was an essay about my mom. My mom is the most generous, giving, wonderful person that you would ever meet. And that's been her legacy to me, to have a daughter who is trying and isn't perfect, but is trying to be a giver. And I would love to pass on that generosity to my two girls.
That's incredible. Generosity is needed right now more than anything else, and compassion. And I'm sure that you are continuing to pass it on, and you will pass it on each day. Angela, listen, thank you so much for your time. I would just like to say that, every time that we have a connection, I really am in a state of awe, whether it's you in the classroom or just these conversations, but your ability to teach and inspire so many, and every person that's ever been a student of yours or read a page in Grit, they've all had some small slice of Angela. And I think that's something really meaningful, because you truly are a gift to us all. So thank you so much for your time and your energy, and most of all, your character.
Chad, thank you so much. I love being friends with you, and I hope this isn't our last conversation.
I promise it won't be. Thanks, Angela.
Good.
Well, thank you everybody for your time today. I'm your host, Chad. You can call me Gorgeous Thomas, signing off. And remember, next week on BetterUp's live episode, we'll have Dr. Susan David, the founder of the Harvard Coaching Institute. And she'll talk about how to build a path of greater success, happiness, and balance in our lives. During these times of uncertainty, just remember, if you do nurture your soul, you will have a life that is a garden of love, peace, love, and absolute soul.